Welcome to the Super Sentai Buddies. This is episode 15 of The Spider-Man Who Loved Me, a podcast dedicated to the Toei production of Spider-Man. Every so often we watch an episode of the show and we share our thoughts with you, the listener. My name is producer Mark. With me, as always, is my co-host and buddy Brian. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing. It's too warm for spring. I think we're suddenly in summer, and I'm unprepared.
We did have a weird, sudden spike of summer in the middle of what was a very chill spring.
It's too warm in my house. My air conditioner's not in. I'm going to die of heat stroke before the end of this podcast.
I had, unrelated to anything other than the change of seasons, for the tail end of winter, I had been parking one of our two cars outside of our garage because the garage door opener just stopped working suddenly. And not like the battery died in the little opener, but like the wheels of the door were getting caught on the track as they raised. And we had a lot going on at that time frame, so we're like, we'll just let it go for a little bit. When it warms up a bit, we can get outside, have a look at it, and fix it. So it's warmer. My wife went outside and said, we should check the garage door. Walked in, pushed the button, opened just fine. After weeks of not working, I don't know how long it's suddenly been working again. My only presumption is it cheered up with the warm weather.
Maybe it was secretly frozen.
I have no idea. But I got a working garage door now, and I didn't have to do anything to fix it other than push a button.
Oh, that seems to be a win.
So today, we are watching Spider-Man episode 15, Our Promise of Life. But first, we do have a bit of administration to attend to. Brian, shining in the heavens, there are 5 stars. A program format that we are required to stick to when we co-host this show. I don't actually know if that's true. I've never asked Matt if we could go off book.
I mean,
I just think I'd feel very guilty if we didn't do it.
To be fair, we're bad at it because when we do the 5 stars, and I think that's true this time as well, we always make it 10 stars.
That is also very true.
We're already bad at the format.
Matt and Dave will be back next week. They're actually hoping to record here in just a couple of days, but we've had enough of an on and off schedule for the last month or two that we didn't want to leave too long of a gap between a new episode. So Brian and I are here to watch maybe the weirdest episode of Spider-Man we've seen yet. I know we say that every week, but here we are saying it again.
I feel like having the long breaks in between just makes the series more bizarre than maybe it truly is.
That could be the case because we get a little distance from it and then go back and are gobsmacked by how weird it is.
Right. It's like we have a very high dose and then, we taper off. Right. And now we don't have any resistance to Japanese Spider-Man anymore.
Right. So we are, as we often do, we're not doing a what's going on in our lives 5 stars. We're doing a top 5. That seems to be the Brian and Mark variant on the 5 stars.
Well, because we tried to save the bits of our boring lives for the other podcasts we do and not right. Sell out our high quality content here.
We do so few exciting things that we need to hoard those so that we can talk about them on the other show.
The only exciting thing I did last week was watch all of BBC's Ghosts.
Yeah, and then told me about how great it was, and now I am watching all of BBC's Ghosts.
If you would like to have a crush on Charlotte Ritchie, please watch all of BBC's Ghosts.
So, usually when we do this segment, it is a complete non sequitur of a 5-star list, because we often record these and put them in the can just so they can be dropped in an emergency. This week we're recording shortly before uploading, and we have a timely 5 stars topic.
Right, which weirdly enough means that the only time this 5 stars will be relevant is about the next 72 hours.
Yeah, so if you didn't know, Mystery Science Theater 3000 is doing another Kickstarter to relaunch Network Free. So they came back a few years ago on Netflix, and Netflix did what they usually do, which is they had a couple of seasons and then cut it, Netflix style. So Mystery Science Theater is trying to do their own thing now. We all on the podcast, I think everyone who is a participant on this podcast is a big fan of that program. So we are very excited for it. It has come up on many stars before as various configurations of the hosts of this panel have gone to see the live shows and things. That said, I know Mystery Science Theater isn't for everyone, and not in like a snooty way, but one, comedy is subjective.
Right.
And further, some people just can't deal with the sort of sense clash of having a second set of voices talking over top a movie. Like, that just doesn't work in their brain, and I get that.
Yep.
So if you're not a Mystery Science Theater person and don't want to listen to Brian and I yammer about it, you can probably jump to about the 20-minute mark of this show and check in, see how we're looking. Because for the next little bit, our 5 stars this week are our personal favorite Mystery Science Theater moments.
That
so we're
we
not
could
picking
come up
favorite
with today.
That we could come up with in the last 2 or so hours. So we're not picking like our favorite episodes or anything, just individual standout moments. Could be an episode, could be a skit, whatever.
We left the rules very loose.
Yeah. So here we go. 5 stars this week, 5 favorite Mystery Science Theater moments. Brian, what is your star number 5?
So my star number 5 is not the movie Final Sacrifice, but instead the entire concept and portrayal of Zap Rousdower.
Yeah.
From I wonder if there's beer on the sun, to the name Zap Rousdower, which is an all-time name. Like, I'm bad at making names, sort of famously. Like,
Sure.
My first D&D character was Orlando Juniper, because I saw a magic card with Juniper Order Advocates, and I'm like, yeah, that'll work.
That'll do it.
Newsflash, it was a terrible character name, and I've never got better. Anyway, Zap Rousdower, your Canadian, wearing effectively the Canadian tuxedo. It's just, he's a paunchy hero.
For all men.
Yes, for all men. For all men who look like perhaps they're doing a second job as a trucker. It's Zap Rousdower. I mean, heck, he puts up with that kid, and for that, like, Zap Rousdower must have incredible stamina.
That episode, which I think is numbered 910, also gave us the Canada song. I wish I was back in old Canada.
Yes, I wish I was back in Canada.
Which is a real delight.
Yeah. What is your number 5?
My number 5 is another fan favorite, and I put it in here early just to, I don't want to say take it off the board, but when I think Mystery Science Theater, one of the first things that jumps to mind is Mr. B Natural.
Yes. Mr. B, you're hot.
This is an incredible short, and also I think the short that we used in college to introduce people to Mystery Science Theater. We watched, like, we were just the right age. The sci-fi era ended pretty much as we were going into college.
Right.
And it was in these still sort of lawless days of the internet.
Yes.
So we had access to, via the internet, just all of Mystery Science Theater. And we made a real good faith effort to watch as much of it as we could, especially freshman year, but really the whole 4 years we were there.
Yep.
And when we would drag new friends in, Mr. B Natural was sort of the, and that was, I think, from Ep 319, War of the Colossal Beast. I do want to very quickly give a hat tip to a Riff Tracks short. Riff Tracks being the Mike Nelson, Bill Corbett, Kevin Murphy project that came after MST3K. Since my number 5 is a short, Mr. B Natural, maybe the greatest Mystery Science Theater short, I just want to briefly call out 3 Magic Words by Riff Tracks.
Which is, that may be my favorite short of all time.
As I was just going to say, it stands up there with the best of what Mystery Science Theater has to offer. I'm not going to get into it a ton because this is an MST3K centric thing, but if you are not familiar with Riff Tracks and want to kind of get a taste of how good it can be, go spend $1, buy 3 Magic Words, and give it a watch. All right, onward. Brian, what is your star number 4?
So I'm picking a song from the Jonah Heston era, and that is the UFO song they sing in Star Crash.
That's so good.
Because Star Crash hits a point where it's just going to be somebody walking through a spaceship for what feels like 100,000 hours.
Yup.
And Jonah starts breaking into a sci-fi reference-laden surf song.
Right. Yeah. Like a 1950s surf rock song.
I mean, lyrics like, on the Kessel Run, yeah, nobody can touch her. Let me be the Picard to your Beverly Crusher.
It's a real good couplet. That's a real good couplet.
It's just great, good stuff like that the whole way through. And, I mean, there's nothing going on screen. And so it's just so absurd and wonderful, and I love it.
Man, music has always been such a weird part of what makes Mystery Science Theater work. And seeing specifically songs like that, and like Every Monster, The Magic in You is another one from an episode within that season, really, like, it made it feel like, okay, yep, this is the thing we love.
Yep, and just a special honorable mention there. The line that Crow gives in the Jonah Heston seasons of "You're Not My Real Dad" is great on so many multiple levels, because, you know, they've changed performers, and Joel was the one who originally built the bots and everything. And so just the delivery and timbre of "You're Not My Real Dad" is just great from Crow.
It's very, very good.
So I will throw to your number 4 as we try to keep this moving along so you don't have a ton of editing to do.
Interestingly, my number 4 is also my call out to the Jonah Heston era of Mystery Science Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of good bits. The one I chose to focus on is very small. It's not necessarily my favorite moment from the season. It's a single line, but it's the moment that I knew everything was going to be okay. As an old fan who was just watching the new series and hopeful because I liked the cast, in episode 1101, Reptilicus, the very first episode of the new era, there's this real dumb joke where she has like 2 jokes an episode because she just like drops something off in the theater and picks it up. Anyway, a guy walks on screen and puts his hat on top of a filing cabinet, and GPC says, "Now you're Mr. Filing Cabinet." And it's such a dumb joke, but it is such a Mystery Science Theater joke. Like that was, and it's fairly early on in the episode, but that was the moment as the first episode was unfolding where I just sort of exhaled and I was like, nope, this is the thing. This is Mystery Science Theater. Like, it's not going to feel exactly like the old one, but they have that magic. Right. That joke is what reassured me that we were in good hands.
Look, sometimes you just want the joke to be dumb.
Yep. All right, what is your star number 3?
My star number 3 is a host segment. Now, let me preface this by saying I'm part of the camp that says sometimes the host segments are good and sometimes they're just actively bad. Sure. I just think that that's a truth that all of us who love MST3K need to come to terms with. Like, some host segments are bad.
Yep.
But for my all-time favorite one that I will still occasionally just throw on, is Cowboy Mike's Ricochet barbecue sauce. It's quick, it moves, it is super dumb. Like,
it's really good.
It's bold.
And then the stunning reveal that it's not actually very bold.
Yeah, what's the deal with this stuff not being bold? And then it's available in new extra bold. Like, it is the pinnacle of this is so dumb that it should not work, and I'm in love with it. I love it so much. I love the sound effects with the hats shooting off because it's so dumb, but there's like a level of dumb that if you commit hard enough, it becomes genius. And that's what Cowboy Mike's Ricochet barbecue sauce
is. It is an example of the host segments at their best. Like when it is just 3 friends just being real goofy. Or I guess 5, because the Mads got in on that short
right.
too.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that maybe it's also of its era, because that would have been in the era of high-quality Grey Poupon and... Oh, what was that?
New York City.
New York City. Like, Old
whatever
El Paso?
the salsa was. Yeah.
Yeah, that salsa, New York City. Like it was the era of weird like cowboy reactions or Victorian reactions to these two brand name products, and that was certainly an era to live through. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is a concept within the show itself. And that is Crotty Robot's script for Earth vs. Soup. Which is just a recurring bit. I think it showed up first in Ep 313, which was Earth vs. Spider, or Earth vs. the Spider.
Mm-hmm.
When Crow insisted that he was writing a screenplay called Earth vs. Soup. And it just recurs multiple times throughout the arc of the show's history. And at a certain point becomes a proxy for the show to lampoon its own struggles in making Mystery Science Theater the movie, which is a thing that happened in real life.
Right. Yeah. Boy, that's a whole different conversation to have.
Right. There was a bit somewhere where he wrote a sequel, I think, called Chocolate Jones and the Temple of Funk.
Now that's a title that someone should make a movie around.
But I love Earth vs. Soup. It got a little nod as well in the Netflix era. It is an endlessly delightful joke for me. There was a window of time on the internet, Brian. I think it was a pre-pandemic thing where the internet had this joke of, I made a bot watch 100 episode of Friends and write a script.
Yep.
And because bot is the terminology that Mystery Science Theater always uses for Servo and Crow,
mm-hmm.
Every time I saw that joke, I just thought of like, yeah, that's what the Foresters were doing. They made a bot watch hundreds of bad movies and then look at the script that he wrote.
Earth vs. Soup.
Earth vs. Soup. What is your number 2 star, Brian?
My number 2 is a full movie, and some might be surprised that it's not number 1, but that movie is Mitchell.
Oh, yeah.
Mitchell is the Joe Don Baker classic. It moves. It really is just a perfect marriage of a whole bunch of things going on. Your slovenly hero, Mitchell.
Yep. The jokes have maybe the crispest pacing they've ever had.
Yep. Your grand 3M commercials going on in the middle of the just everything about Mitchell. Every now and then I will just comment, wasn't John Saxon in this movie? I think it might be my brother's favorite of these. Mitchell is great. Love Mitchell.
Also, the transition episode from Joel to Mike.
Yes. It's firing on every cylinder that it possibly can.
Ah.
Again, on a different day, this might be number 1. What is your number 2?
My number 2 is a Tom Servo song. So, especially after Kevin Murphy had taken over as Tom Servo in season 3 / sort of season 2, depending on how you count the KTMA year.
Right.
Like a big part of Servo's thing was singing, because Kevin just has a lovely singing voice. There's so many, like there are a lot of good options, and I scrolled through a few of them in my head, and it almost was the Tom Servo Men's Choir,
mm-hmm.
which is really fantastic. But ultimately, I landed on the Creepy Girl song from Catalina Caper.
You do like Creepy Girl.
I love the Creepy Girl. And Catalina Caper, to me, it's an early one. It's from 204. It's right in the beginning of season 2. And to me, it is when you feel the show like really find all of the beats. The KTMA years are a different beast entirely. Season 1 is like, it's figuring itself out. When we get to Catalina Caper, that feels to me like the first one that really fully delivers on the formula. And part of that formula is Tom Servo singing. Also, a very brief hat tip to Crow in his Kim Cattrall love song from City Limits, which is maybe the worst song because it's just him like monotone repeating Kim Cattrall, but I love it. All right, star number 1. What is your top star, Brian?
Space Mutiny.
Yeah,
Space Mutiny is an all-time one. I know that over at Riff Tracks they did a re-riff of Space Mutiny. Space Mutiny is just so good. It's the one with Blast Hard Cheese.
Yep.
And just the the riffs are all-timers in Mitchell, and the riffs are very good here, but it blends with how much dumber Space Mutiny is on so many levels.
Yeah.
But, like, dumb in such a way that it holds itself together, and that's always kind of an iffy proposition. Like, a good movie to riff, one has to be bad, but it also has to have the barest semblance of coherence. Or kind of it all falls apart because you can't really even get riff through lines because it's not held together. And Space Mutiny is held together by some very, very dumb pieces. And I think that's one of the things that makes it work so well. I mean, you have basically Santa Claus as, I mean, it's not Santa Claus, but certainly looks like a space version of Santa Claus as who seems to be the guy in charge of this ship. I'm not clear. He doesn't seem like a man who should be in charge of a ship. You have continuity errors where a character who is killed in one scene appears in the very next scene.
Yep.
I mean, the two leads of this movie are actually married in real life, which is fun.
Wild. Yep. And years later, Riff Tracks would do like a new review of it, and Kevin Murphy just dressed up as Space Santa Claus, basically.
Yeah.
And because Kevin Murphy's now like a 60-year-old man with a full white beard, it is uncanny how much he looked like that character.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you even have the secret reveal at the end that the villain's not really dead. Everything about Space Mutiny works. But the main thing is railing kills and, you know, Big McLarge Huge.
Yeah.
And what is your number one?
My number one, with an honorable mention to Puma Man, possibly the Retrograde Orbit Society's most watched episode of Mystery Science Theater. There was, in fact, a Puma Man off-the-cuff joke in our daily email chain just today. But my number one is, it's the episode Santa Claus, number 521.
Yeah.
Which is an incredibly good one. And it is specifically the riff where Lupita, the little girl who's the lead of the movie, is standing outside a department store just sadly looking in.
Mm-hmm.
And then a minute later is watching other kids engage with Santa. And the riff is Santa's laughter mocks the poor.
It's so dark.
And not only is it an incredibly good and dark joke, it's also like, it's a really good little like commentary on the consumerist nature of Christmas buried into this goofy riff.
Yeah.
It's a knife twister of a joke. And it for me, it really exemplifies, because that was fairly early on in the Mike run. That was not long after he took over. And it exemplifies the sort of sharper edge of the Mike era.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So, Brian, I think it is time to watch episode 15 of Spider-Man, Our Promise of Life. First, we're going to take a little break so I can refill my drink.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to check out this episode, and we will be right back.
Change the pardon.
We're back. I don't even know how to start framing this episode. How did this episode hit you?
It hit weird because, I think there's something we need to reveal up front about this episode. These episodes are about 24, 25 minutes long.
Yep.
There is no hint that the Iron Cross Army even exists in this episode until minute 11:30.
I'm honestly a little worried that our talk about this episode is going to be about 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
I don't know how, there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, it's going to be real difficult. Like, at first, I was wondering, are they ever going to show up? Is this just a Spider-Man does a good deed this
slice
week?
of life episode?
This is one of those episodes they put on the schedule when they don't want to pay anybody that week.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I do love, in almost any series, I do love a good slice of life episode. This one's real interesting. Let's just get right into it. We open on a kid doing a little grocery shopping at an outdoor market.
Right. Seems fine.
Extremely normal. He's got, I think, what every human would describe as a shopping bag.
Yeah.
And inside his shopping bag are a few groceries. And then he is just accosted by a group of, half a dozen or so 7-year-olds? To be clear, this kid is also about 7.
Right, yes. We should make that clear. And they're all in baseball uniforms, and one of them is Spider-Man's little brother.
Yeah, Takuji is here. He's one of the baseball bros.
Yeah, and apparently grocery shopping was a gendered activity in the 1970s.
Yeah, boy. Because at first I thought because they're making fun of him for the bag he's carrying. And at first I thought they're making some dumb gender joke about a boy carrying a purse. I got it. It's the 70s. No, it's even dumber and worse than that. They're making a dumb gender joke about grocery shopping.
And then they escalate it because then they see what he's actually bought. And it feels like they're scolding him for buying basic groceries.
It's right. That's very weird. They're like, haha, why are you buying this ridiculous pile of nonsense? And I think maybe they're laughing at him for not buying much.
I guess you only bought 2 eggs, some zucchini, cheese. I don't know if there was cheese. I can't remember.
Yeah, a little bit of rice.
Right. You only bought 3 things. It's worse. It's not just this is a gendered activity, but you must also be poor.
I guess it's a poor joke, right? That's the only way I could process that.
I guess. I mean, this might be one that we just don't have the cultural context to really process.
Maybe so. Maybe there is something there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it does have something to do with the food, but
because it's pretty normal. And where we live a bit away from a grocery store. We live very rurally.
Right.
So grocery shopping for us would often involve buying enough groceries for, a week or more at a time.
Right.
But it is very normal if you live close to a grocery store to just go buy groceries for dinner that night. Yeah. That's just a thing that happens. And that's very clearly what this kid has done. He has went and bought the groceries he needs to make dinner tonight.
Yeah, honestly, you kids there, you're mocking not having a lot of groceries. Let me tell you about grocery runs when you're a college student. You know what you're going to get? $5 of ramen. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah. Yep. First, they make fun of him for, I think, being a girl or something because he's grocery shopping.
Right.
Then they make fun of him for being poor. And then they just steal his groceries and destroy them.
Right.
This just keeps escalating.
Yeah. Well, Takoya shows up. He's like,
yes.
Hey, what are you doing? And that's when they kind of drop the bag and run.
Yeah. The eggs break.
Yeah.
The kid is very sad. And Takoya, in what is easily Takoya the human's best episode, because usually this guy is not he's not real great at being a brother. He's not real great at being a boyfriend.
He's terrible at being a boyfriend.
Yeah. But in this episode, we get a truly humane and humanitarian Takoya. And he buys the kid not only replacement groceries, but a little more. And then says, hey, one of those idiots was my little brother. And don't you worry, I will be having words with him tonight.
The funny thing is, because of how they cut the scene, it did seem at first like Takoya was only going to walk over, say sorry for a minute, and then they lingered there, and I wrote down in my notes, he's going to say sorry, but this is Takoya. He's not going to actually pay for those eggs.
Yeah,
and he did.
That is absolutely what I expected.
I was absolutely surprised that old Spider-Man came through here.
And then he goes home and he chats with the kid.
Yeah.
He's taking some time to make a personal connection with this kid because he can tell this kid has been verbally, physically, emotionally abused, and my brother was partially at fault. So he's kind of hanging out to help this kid lift his spirits. He goes home with him. He's chatting with the kid while the kid cooks. And he's just kind of learning about his life a little. And this kid's life is challenging.
Yep.
Not particularly atypical. His dad has passed, so his mom is a single parent, so she has to work a lot. So the kid has been forced to grow up quicker than he otherwise could or should have because he takes care of the house. He makes dinner. He cleans. Again, a fairly recognizable and universal story, I think. Then we learn, because he's cooking dinner and he just grabs his chest like he's having a heart attack. The subtitles I was watching initially described it as a seizure. I think that was a translation error.
It might be the second most egregious translation error in the episode, because it also feels very much like that's not a seizure. Because we find that this is a vascular issue and a seizure is typically a neurological issue. But effectively, doubles over in pain because there are problems with his heart.
And he sort of waves Takoya off. The kid's name is Junshi, by the way. I don't think we've brought that up yet. Mm-hmm. Junshi kind of waves Takoya off, and he kind of grimaces. He's like, no, it's fine. It'll pass. So here's this poor, brave 7-year-old, single mom, has to, do the cooking himself. And he's also, at 7, learned to just, grimace through severe chest pain to wait for it to pass.
That's a rough deal.
We have really, this kid, I know the point was to build this kid as a sad yet relatable story. But boy, is it he's got a lot working against him.
Right. Well, not only that, the other thing he has working against him is the universe where this show exists. Because, weirdly enough, this is a show where you absolutely have to worry about whether or not this child is going to make it through this episode.
Right. Yeah. It is entirely plausible, given how the previous 14 episodes have gone, that this kid is not making it out of the episode.
Yeah.
He also says, and this now explains to us why the bullies were wearing baseball uniforms earlier in the episode. Because he says, due to my condition, I can't play sports. I can't play baseball. I can't play soccer. And so the other boys make fun of me.
I would argue that, he probably could play soccer. It'll just look like he's taking a dive, but, the European leagues are going to love him.
So that kind of frames up the bullying. He is a physically handicapped kid, and that is frequently a target for grade schoolers.
Yep.
And it all kind of tracks. Again, whether I don't know to what degree they were trying to frame this kid, but it is very relatable. I found this the actor's doing a pretty good job. This young 7-year-old is doing pretty good work on the whole.
Yeah.
But also just the framing of this character is deeper and more complex and relatable than a lot of the one-off characters that we get.
Yeah, I feel also because it's a juxtaposition of being in kind of the worst situation and circumstances, but the episode is not dwelling on that. This kid's just trying to make it through the day.
Yeah, he's he is the center of this story, but we're not dwelling on all of the difficulties in his life. We're just telling a story about him. I will say it's interesting to watch in light of the fact that we've already seen one episode where Spider-Man becomes the proxy big brother to another kid.
Right, yeah. And then that kid has to get sent away, far, far away, so he never sees Spider-Man again or some such stuff.
Right.
So you already have no idea how this is all gonna play out.
So the kid's mom comes home. Takoya goes home and just gives an earful appropriately to Takuji. He really chews him out for being a bully, but specifically for targeting someone weaker than him. He says, you don't know that kid's story. You don't know how hard he works. This was an incredibly awful thing for you to do. And their sister Shinko also chimes in specifically to point out, bullying someone weaker than you is about the crummiest it gets for humans.
Yeah. Also, I like the call out of, what, you think being good at baseball and soccer makes you better than people? Wise up,
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah, it is like, not only is Takoya an actual good person in this episode, the sort of moral structure of it is pretty sound. Like, the moral lesson here, it's pretty decent.
Yeah. Don't be an awful human being is basically what it boils down to.
That is basically what it boils
and
down to.
And it's not even, approaching it like, well, we should nuance this. It's like, no, that was an awful thing to do. Don't do awful things.
Yeah. And Shinko turns around from the sink and is like, yeah, that's right. Don't do awful things. And as a way of sort of trying to cheer Juchi up, Takoya goes to hang out with him as Spider-Man. So we just get like a cutscene of Spider-Man and a 7-year-old playing in a park.
Yeah, I mean, at times, Spider-Man is being very reckless with this child's safety.
That's true.
And also, like, I know you're trying to say, like, you can do it. Spider-Man, don't do things only Spider-Man can do when you're trying to teach that. Like,
right.
Don't leap up 20 feet in the air and climb a tree and then, like, stand like, yeah, you can do this. Like, no. This kid, even with, full capabilities and no hindrances, cannot climb a tree like that, Spider-Man. He does not have spider powers. But
yeah,
I mean, the heart is there, and he kind of helps him semi climb the tree, and they're having a park day of it. Is there nobody else in this park that seems absurd that nobody is in that park saying, is Spider-Man just hanging out in the park today?
Yeah, it's very weird, and it is definitely jarring that the park is that empty.
Honestly, one of the things about this universe that this episode will also call into question later is, outside of people who directly interact with Spider-Man, are other people aware that Spider-Man exists? Because sometimes it seems like, no.
That's actually something I have later in the notes, but let's talk about it now.
Yep.
There's a weird discrepancy within this universe in that Spider-Man, when the narrative needs it, is famous and well-known.
Mm-hmm.
Like episodes like this, a 7-year-old will see him and go, oh my gosh, it's Spider-Man. I can't believe it's Spider-Man, hero of Tokyo.
Right.
But at other times, you get the impression that Spider-Man operates completely under the radar and the general public is not aware of him at all.
You mean, why? Because later in this episode, that kid will mumble Spider-Man, and his mother will be like, Spider-Man? What's that mean?
The heck is that?
What do you mean, what's that mean? It's Spider-Man!
But it's still, like, oddness of the scene aside, it is sort of sweet. And it's like, on the whole, I think they get the tone they're going for here.
Yeah, and this is also around the time we're like, is this just what the episode is this week? Like, we're gonna have fun montage adventures with this kid? I mean, I guess we can do that. Honestly, if we were going to do the full episode about that, I am 100% certain that would mean the kid dies in the end.
Yep. This was also the point for me, or the very next scene, because the next scene is the kid going to school and telling the bullies, hey, guess who's hanging out with Spider-Man? And that's when I started thinking, like, oh, is this episode just like fully slice of life?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, that's some real bully survival 101 unforced error.
Mm-hmm.
The kid wants the bullies to think he's cool.
Right.
And so he's going to tell them the cool thing that he's doing. And listen, if you, this is not good advice, because there's no good advice for being bullied, because bullying is terrible. But, like, going to find the bullies to try to convince them you're cool is never going to help your cause.
No. I mean, it's weird because we're in the one exception in media, which is if you're friends with a superhero. That's the thing. Friends with a superhero is the exception in media that teaches, like, no, it'll be cool. That superhero will show up later. And, like, but Superman and Spider-Man don't exist in the real world, so perhaps you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. And I get it. He's 7 and a very cool thing has happened to him.
Right.
So I'm not shaming the kid here.
Yeah.
He's doing what would be natural to any 7-year-old.
Right.
Which is tell other kids about the cool thing that just happened to him.
Right. We're trying to protect the 7 to 10-year-old audience listening to us right now.
Right. But as a guy who talked on mic frequently about how having suffered through extended bullying in grade school, I just shook my head at poor Junchi here when he tried to convince the bullies that he was cool.
No.
Like, buddy, no, just get your head down. Just get your head down and get out of there. All right. After that, the baseball team laughs at him. He's like, yeah, right. You're not hanging out with Spider-Man. That's ludicrous. But Takuji does hang around. Now, I'm not going to give too many props to Takuji here because he does not go out of his way to stand up for this boy. He doesn't say a dang word while the rest of his team is around.
And he actually starts walking off with the team until he pulls kind of I'm going to stand here a bit, wait till the team is like out of eye shot so they can't actually see me hang out with this kid. But then I'm going to start hanging out with him. So it's, not full marks here, but I guess better than nothing.
Yeah, credit at least for legitimately apologizing. Not like, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but he said, what I did was bad and I am sorry.
Right.
So credit for that.
Yeah, we get some points for de minimis effort.
Yeah, yep. And then the kid has another vascular issue, and we smash cut to the hospital where his mom is talking to Takoya about the hole in his heart.
Right. Which is, I think, the second wildest thing that she brings up. The first wildest is we haven't gotten it fixed because, the stuff with his father is so recent. Not that, the stress would be bad for him or we can't pay for it. It's like, his dad just died, so we're going to leave him with a crippling medical condition until he's over that.
Very strange.
It's like, no, I would think that being more recent is all the more reason to fix this thing, which I'm sure is affected by stress, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that sentence was a real roller coaster because she started by saying we were going to have it addressed, but then his father died. And so you are waiting for the back end of that sentence to be like, and, the cost of the funeral and everything bankrupted us, or we lost our health insurance because he was our primary earner. You're expecting something like that. Yeah. And it just turns into we were just very sad, which granted, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But still that it was not what I expected the second half of that sentence to be.
Also, his mother, I guess, she's just used to taking everything in stride because she very much delivers it the heart surgery. I guess we were going to get around to it. I guess it has to be now. But she does not seem either stressed that it's happening now or majorly inconvenienced that it's happening now. Just sort of I guess now. I guess now is fine.
Mom is weird. As much as I praised the kid's performance, the mom's performance throughout most of this episode is just odd.
Yeah. You would have thought that she's the secret monster, but she is not.
So the kid is going to have to get surgery. He's muttering about Spider-Man in his sleep. And this is when you pointed out earlier, the mom's like, that is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I think the next scene is a visit from Shinko and Takuji. And for just a minute, this scene threw me off because it felt odd to cram Spider-Man's siblings into this part of the episode.
Right.
And then I remember the B plot here is that Takuji is trying to become friends with this. He's trying to be a pal.
Right. And Shinko would have had to drive him to the hospital.
Exactly. So once my brain reconciled that, I was like, okay, no, this makes sense.
Right.
And when they open the door, they find a note jammed in Junichi's hospital room door from Spider-Man.
Saying, I'll be there for the surgery.
Yeah,
which
hang in there, kid. I'll come for the surgery.
Which to me very much sounded like I'm going to perform the surgery.
It definitely did. Don't worry about that hole in your heart. Spider-Man's going to take care of it.
Spider-Man doesn't know surgery. I'm not even sure 616 Peter Parker knows surgery.
Yeah. Now, if this were Peter Parker, I would at least buy that there's some plausible explanation for him knowing a medical procedure.
Right. Maybe not open heart surgery, but
right. But dirt bike and Takuji, no.
No.
But really what he's saying is like, I'll be there to cheer you on. You know, I'll be there to be part of your team. Shinko has heard the note. She heads out and gives a call to, I'm sorry, listener, she places a call to Hitomi's butt.
Yeah.
Because the phone rings, we cut to Hitomi, who, for reasons that I think are ostensibly like, she's doing some aerobic exercises.
Right.
It's just her butt up in the air. It's jarring.
Look, that was all 1970s and 1980s exercise videos were.
That is true. Yep.
So.
Just Jane Fonda or whatever, like, your individual home nation's version of Jane Fonda was.
Right.
It was a weird time for exercise.
Right. So it's not even jarring in the sense it's like, oh, right, they used to do this like this. I think the secondary note, which is not about Hitomi's butt, is Hitomi has a very nice apartment from what we can see of it.
Yeah. Hitomi is doing well for herself as a roving newspaper photographer.
Yeah, I'm like, why? This is just another in the long line of, why are you with Takoya? You could do so much better.
Yeah, man. In a slightly cooler story, Hitomi is just our Spider-Man in this universe.
I mean, she would be Spider-Gwen. I guess Spider-Hitomi, but that wouldn't really...
Or, you know, like, she'd just be a spider person. She'd be like Silk or Spider-Woman, like one of the many spiders person.
Right. Silk seems more correct. I've always felt like, sure, there's a Spider-Woman, but her powers seem so disparate compared to Spider-Man's powers that, like, other characters, Spider-Verse wives, have similar powers, and this is way too far down this rabbit hole.
This is not a thing we need to discuss, I suppose, but that is a weird thing that Spider-Woman, which seems like the most obvious Spider-Man analog, right? Like Hulk and She-Hulk, Spider-Man and Spider-Woman, is maybe the least cool of the many very cool Spider-Persons who have been part of the Spider-Man story.
I'm wondering if, you know, to say least cool is probably a loaded term, but I'm wondering if part of that is because she's not really an analog, and whereas the others function in a very similar way to Spider-Man.
That's true, yeah.
It's that the others, because they're functioning like Spider-Man, you know, Spider-Man's already great. They're also all great. And Spider-Woman's character is different in a way that, honestly, if the character was named something different, you wouldn't be trying to fit her in the Spider-Man box.
Right.
But anyway, sorry, Jessica Drew.
That was Mark and Brian vamp for a couple of minutes to fill out this short episode. So Shinko has called Hitomi and says, hey, I got a hot tip for you for your newspaper job. I can tell you where you can get pictures of Spider-Man.
And Hitomi basically seems to have an article written and ready to go within, the hour?
Yeah.
And she's back at work, pitching to her boss at the Weekly Woman, who, as we all may remember, is secretly the Amazoness. It's like, yeah, Spider-Man's gonna be at the hospital. And this is where it's like, oh, right, there are villains and evildoers in this show.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is weird to remember that Hitomi's boss at the newspaper is just the Amazoness.
Right.
Because it is a mostly, like, vestigial plot point, but every now and then it becomes weirdly relevant.
It's like Gus's job at the pharmaceutical company in Psych.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so we cut to Amazoness being Amazoness, talking to Professor Monster for all of, 20 seconds. They come up with the plan, let's kill Spider-Man, and that's the last we're going to see of Professor Monster this week, so...
Yeah, Professor Monster's just here long enough to say, yeah, whatever, I guess send some minions to the hospital. I'm not going to put a whole lot of thought into this one.
No, it's like, oh, we came in halfway through the episode, like, we don't got time to plan or care.
I like the idea that Professor Monster's like, oh, you wrote me in 1 minute of this episode? Well, I'm going to give you the effort of a character who's in this movie for 1 minute. Right. That's how much effort you're getting.
Hand wave, go kill Spider-Man, thanks.
Yep.
Monster out.
So Spider-Man says, all right, off to the hospital. He talks to himself a lot in this episode, which I enjoy. He gets in the whole Spider-Man getup, gets on a nearby roof, sees Hitomi here, and then sees a bunch of, I guess, sort of suspicious-looking passers-by.
Yeah, like that guy on crutches. He looks suspicious in a hospital.
Maybe his spider sense was tingling, I guess.
I guess is
usually there's a more visual signifier of that in this universe.
Yeah, and then he uses like the device on his arm.
What is happening here?
I can't tell. Is he decloaking them to reveal their ninders, or is he only like seeing through the mirage that they've put up of being like people?
I don't know.
Because the thing is, when they're revealed as ninders, Spider-Man is still not seen by anybody, so they continue doing their things, which my favorite is clearly the Ninder on crutches.
Ninder on crutches is great.
Because Ninder on crutches is still, like, using those crutches, trying to get along.
The implication very clearly is that somehow the, like, gigantic boxy wrist communicator on his wrist lets him see through their disguises.
Right, but only if he remembers to turn it on.
Yeah, like he's got to push a button. Yeah. And then, like, Hitomi's boss, the editor at the paper, shows up. Spider-Man's very confused by her presence here, and he pushes the button on his wrist again, and he has finally seen through the Amazoness's clever secret disguise.
Right. Like, this is a heck of an episode to just like, oh yeah, let's resolve that plot point and not do a ton with it, but like, yep, now he knows who the Amazoness is.
Yep. So Spider-Man is hesitant to actually go into the hospital because if he does, he's going to get jumped by a bunch of Ninders and possibly put the people in the hospital at risk because he's going to bring Ninders into the hospital. So he is not going in, but that means inside, Junshi is very worried and upset that Spider-Man made a promise to him and is not delivering.
Right. And this is at the point where I'm thinking, is Spider-Man not showing up going to let this child die of a broken heart?
Right.
Because this universe has done that sort of thing to us before.
It absolutely has. And this is the one place in the episode where the mom kind of steps up, and by which I don't mean she wasn't taking care of him before. She has always been taking care of him, but her performance has been sketchy.
Yeah.
Throughout, and to be fair, the writing of her character has been a little weird. But she takes her kid and says, listen, I know you're very sad, but it is quite possible that Spider-Man had other very important things to attend to right now.
You know who
she doesn't say like on the nose, listen, remember he is saving the Earth.
Right.
But she's kind of covering that.
You know who hasn't been helpful? Takuji.
Yeah.
With his kind of, I'm sure like he thinks he's being helpful by reinforcing what this child is feeling, but yelling, Spider-Man's a liar! That's not helping the situation.
That's not doing any good.
I mean,
you're only escalating here.
Right. It feels very much like Takuji's secret real miffness is he hasn't gotten to hang out with Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, Takuji is definitely annoyed that he has not got to meet Spider-Man.
Right. He's trying to be, it's like a kid trying to be on their best behavior for Christmas, but also really feeling they're justified in petulancy.
Yeah, 100%. So, boy, okay. Spider-Man now, realizing that he's not going to make it because he's going to have to lead the Amazoness away from the hospital, writes a note and folds it up into a paper airplane.
Just like this is the least Spider-Man solution to this problem.
It's so wild.
Like what I could see for like a normal Spider-Man solution would be like you would put it in a thing and then shoot a web that would carry it the whole way over and like stick on the wall in the room or something.
Right, yeah.
But no, he just paper airplane.
Just paper airplaned it. And the note arrives after Junchi has already been like taken out to be prepped for surgery.
To be fair, only about 20 seconds after that has happened.
Yeah. Shinko finds the note, but cannot get there in time because by the time like she runs down the hall and she's like beating on the door trying to yell the information in, but the kid's already been put under.
Yeah, and they're already in the middle of surgery. I mean, this healthcare system works fast.
It works very fast.
I mean, he's in the hospital. Well, I guess we can do the surgery today.
And while that is happening, Amazonis says to her henchman, I wrote this down as a quote because it's great. Spider-Man will probably come soon, so be sure to shoot him. And then everyone just pulls out guns from their like coat pockets.
I mean, at least Amazonis is finally getting down to business. Like,
yeah.
You know what? Just don't try to capture. Just shoot him.
Quit
Spider-Man.
trying weird martial arts that Spider-Man is clearly superior at.
Yeah.
Just shoot the Spider-Man. But Amazonis, it turns out, has a very limited well of patience because she gets mad about 15 minutes. She's like, so much for Spider-Man's promises.
Just the concept of Amazonis being both annoyed that she's had to wait, nothing has happened, and also feeling somewhat disappointed in Spider-Man because he was not reliable.
Yeah.
It's a real hook.
So she leaves. Spider-Man confronts her and says, hey, I know who you are, Amazonis, because she's still in disguise as the paper editor.
Yeah.
And it turns into a bit of a chase scene. She tries to shoot him. She's standing like 3 feet away, but misses by a good 1.5 feet.
Yeah, we go through a scene where there isn't fighting. There's just Spider-Man walking by stuff that explodes.
Yep,
but
that happens for a while.
You know what they didn't do? Tell Spider-Man he should react to anything exploding. Like
Spider-Man is real cash in this whole sequence.
It's like Spider-Man was told, people who walk away from large explosions in slow-mo like nothing's happening? Just do that all the time.
Yep.
We're gonna blow up like an entire like bridgey thing, and you're gonna be fine.
Yep. So eventually Spider-Man and the Amazonis confront each other again. And apparently there's a Monster of the Week, which I just thought wasn't happening by this point, because there's legitimately 3 minutes of this episode left.
Yep. And this is where I get to what I believe is the most egregious mistranslation.
Yeah, would you like to tell us about this monster, Brian?
You mean Killer Unicorn?
Killer Unicorn.
What is the key feature you would say of a unicorn?
The one long horn, usually. I mean, also being a horse is pretty key.
Right. So would you say clearly being a dinosaur that's a triceratops is not a unicorn?
Well, yeah, the presence of 3 horns does sort of take away from the part of unicorn.
It's not even like it's a horse with 3 horns. It's clearly a triceratops.
Yeah, 100%. You could maybe make an argument that it's a bit of a rhinoceros.
Yeah, you could that. They
but there's nothing equine about this monster.
No. I'm wondering if they got to this part of the episode, they're like, throw someone in. What have you written down? Killer Unicorn. Do we have any costumes that have horns on them? This one, that's got like 4 horns. And like, whatever. 3, 4, 1, it's all the same.
I presume it is either exactly that, like just a rushed and kind of sloppy job in production, or, as you suggested earlier, maybe just a bad localization in the translation.
Right. Because, come on, whoever localized it had to speak English, and I would think could see that that's not a unicorn.
That is absolutely... it's not an anything, though.
Right.
This thing is here for like 30 seconds of... It might have less screen time than Professor Monster.
Honestly... Like, even when it does its grow animation, doesn't it look like it only grew to half the height all other monsters grow to?
Yeah, I very much presume this is a monster that they made several weeks ago and we're like, this guy's not going anywhere. And so they just like chucked him out at this very clearly half-hearted and already failed plan.
You know how half-hearted this is? Like, sometimes I write down how the episode is going to end. You know, Marveler, change Leopardon, arc turn, sword vigor.
Yep.
Because that's what happens. We didn't even do arc turn this week. We just immediately went to sword vigor fight over.
Yeah. He called Marveler, and I'll be honest, he looked a little sleepy when he was riding Marveler.
Yeah.
He looked like he put a little bit of a edge in his voice when he yelled for Marveler.
Yeah, like he was in real danger.
But then it looked like he took a nap while he was having a ride at Marveler.
Right. It's like, I mean, I don't even know why there's just not a sequence where Marveler changes into Leopardon just flat out all the time and throws a sword.
Yeah.
Like, we got this pretty well on autopilot.
Yep. And that's that for Killer Unicorn or whatever this thing is.
Killer Unicorn of the three-horned kind.
And then Spider-Man goes back to visit the boy after his surgery. And this feels a little closer to the Takuji that I know and love. Because we're now getting minimal effort Spider-Man.
You mean Spider-Man who can't figure out how to open that window so he can come inside and is just waving at the kid through the window upside down? Yeah.
He just gives him a wave from outside. He's like, hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
That's it. I like to think that, like, after the episode cut, he actually went inside and visited, but it very much looks like he just, like, swung by to wave from the window and then cruise on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Spider-Man, you could have revealed yourself by swinging by the window and then swinging out. Like, you wouldn't have had to go into the hospital, and if you just started swinging away, they wouldn't do anything with the hospital, but
He did arrive, like, 8 seconds after Takuji left, so Takuji still does not get to see Spider-Man.
Right. Yep.
And then the narration shows up to say, as long as Spider-Man possesses a warm heart, he will never be beaten by the Iron Cross army.
Yep, that is certainly a thing that was said. Also, we glossed over it, but when he, shouted his battle cry, it was this week, the man who risks his life for promises, Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's not an emissary from hell this week.
Yeah.
He absolutely did not risk his life for promises, though.
No.
He very intentionally did not deliver on his promise to save lives. It's the opposite of what he said.
Right. He very much used exact wording rules and like, I will be there after the surgery.
Yep.
Like, that's kind of like being there for your surgery. It's a nebula. I'll visit at some point.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where the Washington Post will like rate it kind of in the middle for mostly true or mostly false, depending on how they feel in the day. Like, there's an element of truth to what he said. It's all about a certain point of view.
Yeah. Yep. And that's our episode.
Yep. Just, and that kid's fine, we should point out.
The kid recovers from surgery from what we can tell.
Yeah, that was not how we expected the episode to go, because, again, this universe doesn't have problems with, like, inflicting death on people at times that you would not expect. So, kid survives. And kid doesn't have to be shipped away to some secret facility or anything like that.
He actually gets to just have a better life than he had yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is a rarity in this particular universe.
Yes, it is.
Man, it was very fun and as weird as it always is to revisit Spider-Man.
Yes, it was. So weird.
But I think that's it for us this week, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
So that means it's time to tell you that the Super Sentai Buddies are a production of Retrograde Orbit Radio. You can find it and all of the other Retrograde Orbit Radio shows on retrogradeorbitradio.com. You can find Matt, your usual host, on Twitter at Super Sentai Bros. You can find me at RO Radio, and you can find Brian at Mount Olympus Pod, which is the Twitter handle for our other podcast. We'd like to remind you that shining in the Apple Podcast review section are 5 stars. Please take a moment when you can to rate, review, subscribe on Apple or whatever podcast catcher you use. That is going to do it for us this week. Thanks for joining in. I'm Mark.
I'm Brian.
And we will see you next week for the greatest show on earth.
Spider-Man.